Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Moby.
Now my first question is, did someone type my speech into the teleprompter? No? Please? I'm not very literate, and okay. Well, let me just walk back and I'll pretend to do that again, okay? A few weeks ago when I got the phone call asking me to induct Steely Dan into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I immediately asked myself a few questions. The first of these questions was, why are they asking me? Because as far as I know, Steely Dan seemed to hate everybody. So I was flattered but very suspicious. I wondered to myself, either they like me or for some reason they really hate me and this is some sort of monstrous practical joke. Because the truth is, we are talking about two men who named their band after a dildo in a William S. Burroughs book. So after I got over my suspicions that this was a practical joke, although to be honest with you, I haven't quite gotten over my suspicions, and I do have this fear that there's like a cadre of giant rubber chickens waiting off stage that they're going to pelt me with. But assuming this isn't a practical joke on their part, I have to say that I'm completely thrilled to be here as the official Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductor for Steely Dan. Although I'm not quite sure what an inductor is, but I'm proud to have Steely Dan as my inductees. One of the things that inducting Steely Dan into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame demonstrates to me is the inclusive nature of rock culture. Because although Steely Dan do have a very visceral quality to their music, I would hardly consider them a kick-ass, balls-to-the-walls, brainless rock band. Not that there's anything wrong with kick-ass, balls-to-the-wall, brainless rock music, but, and I do feel like a bad cliche saying this, the musical tradition that Steely Dan represent is certainly one that's more cerebral and intellectual, and beautiful as well. For one of the things that's always struck me about Steely Dan is that although they seem to approach popular culture with a certain sense of irony and distaste, they also clearly have a love for beauty and beautiful music. I mean, they cite John Coltrane as one of their influences, and A Love Supreme is probably one of the most beautiful and sublime recordings of the 20th century. So I found myself in this strange position of trying to find out biographical information about Steely Dan. And when I did, I encountered nothing but really bizarre apocryphal stories. According to what I found on the internet, Walter and Donald were members of the Baader-Meinhof terrorist organization in Germany. They were the inventors of the indoor swimming pool. They have spent time training circus elephants, and they are super rich moguls who own a chain of corrupt retirement homes in Brazil. The only seemingly reliable piece of biographical information that I was able to uncover is that they both went to Bard in 1967, which explains a lot to me. And if you know anything about Bard and Simon's Rock, I'm sure that the fact that they went there explains a lot to you too. So last night, I was talking to my friend Damien about my inducting Steely Dan into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we were reminiscing about growing up with Steely Dan in the 70s. And the one memory that we both had in common was hearing the song FM on the radio and being scandalized that they could actually say, fucked up music. In fact, it wasn't until we were both well past puberty that we realized they were in fact saying funked up music, but the sense of strange subversion still remains. And in a weird way, I always found that song, FM, to be extremely subversive. The line, no static at all, still kind of makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up and conjures up this image of a deathless and airless life in Los Angeles that's equally horrifying and seductive. I don't know if that was their intention, but it's very effective. Another thing that my friend and I were reminiscing about, and I hope I don't mean this in an offensive way, but how weird Steely Dan are. And I really don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean weird in a wonderful and slightly unsettling sense. Steely Dan are weird because they didn't choose to play obscure jazz in the East Village, but rather chose to make beautiful records that sold millions of copies and became radio staples throughout the world. But they've always seemed different somehow. On the one hand, their music is warm and beautiful, and on the other hand, their music is quite foreign. And that's what makes them so wonderful and so unsettling. Because every time you listen to a Steely Dan record, you find yourself seduced by the warmth and the beauty of the music, and then you become wonderfully unsettled by their intelligence and their otherworldliness. And now they're supposed to run a video clip, I think.